Hello everybody, and today I'm talking about depression. I sometimes use these clinical terms, but I'm much more interested in actual our direct experience. And so the word or the clinical diagnosis of depression is fairly abstract in the sense that it doesn't actually point to our experience very directly. Here's what I mean. Many people who have come to us over the years, to our treatment centers and to this work online, have come with this notion that they're depressed. But when you look and they start to look deeper into their experience, what they really find is that they are suffering from deficiency stories, or maybe there's trauma that was not resolved. And so they're dealing with the pain of the past that they're carrying over into their present experience, and it just manifests then as what we would call depression. And that doesn't mean that there aren't certain forms of depression that don't come from what's happened to us, that maybe they have to do with our brain wiring or our genetics. But we see a large number of people coming with this diagnosis of depression, which are really just suffering again from unresolved trauma or certain deficiencies or identities or stories or beliefs that have actually clouded their view of life and created a sort of malaise and ongoing sadness or hopelessness or malaise. And so we tend to shy away from, we are not therapists, this is not therapy, this is not counseling, this is not psychoanalysis, we are not doing that with these inquiries. This is a spiritual approach of self-inquiry coming from the East. So depression is a Western idea, really. It's a Western diagnosis coming from our Western materialistic scientific model of understanding things over here. We cannot divorce it, though, from experience, and that's the key. For those who are feeling depressed because of what happened to them in trauma or whatever they're believing, that needs to be dealt with differently than just throwing medications at it all the time, right? Sometimes medications are helpful, but again, to get to the root of the issue of the depression is much more helpful and more healing. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, there's a lot of different inquiries to go into, but we can start just by challenging the notion that we are depressed, okay? We talked about reverse inquiry earlier, right? So let's say I'm someone who believes I'm depressed. One way to start inquiry is I would sit here and use a reverse inquiry and say, I'm not depressed. And then I don't analyze that. I don't try to use that as a positive affirmation. The phrase, I'm not depressed, is like that worm food that's placed over the wormhole that's going to pull out all the proof in my consciousness that tells me that I am depressed. You see, the ego is going to fight with the statement, I'm not depressed, and it's going to show me, yes you are. You're sad. You're hopeless. What's the point? There's nothing to live for. Whatever. And then there we go, the worm has come out of hiding again, right? And now we can see the contents of our own mind from awareness. And from that we can witness. Because if we start engaging in those thoughts, we get into this circular thinking and we go back into the mind that created the problem, right? By thinking about it. But instead we're just going to rest and look at these thoughts that come through. One way we can look at the thoughts is just looking at them one at a time. One set of words at a time. Just observing them or just hearing them. Maybe you see them spelled out, whatever they are, like life is hopeless. Just resting with that a little bit. And then maybe turning to one of the other thoughts in the series and just looking at that for a second by itself. And then maybe to another thought in the series. And you start to break it up and you see these are individual arisings that when taken together make me feel like I'm depressed, but when I look at them, they're actually just individual words. And as I stay within each individual words, whether I'm hearing them or seeing them, sooner or later they fall away, just through being aware of them. And if they don't, I can just do a little tapping, simple inquiry, just to help unhook, or any of the other hand tools, right? But eventually, if you stay aware, no matter whether you're using a hand tool or not, stay aware of what's happening here, you'll see that by resting and using these tools, these thoughts begin to fall into the silence. They disappear in our awareness. And when they do, again, that's an opportunity to come down and feel what we're calling depression in the body. But if we take that word off of it, take the word depression off of it, take the word sadness off of it, put those words up there first, even before you go into the body. Otherwise, you drag those concepts down into the body and you reinforce them, right? Let's look at the word depression, the word sadness for a second first. Just those labels, let them be there. You can always turn off the camera. If you're looking at your own thing coming up here and you need more time, stop the camera and start it back when you're finished. I don't have anything really coming up. I'm just looking at vague words that don't feel true. But for you, if these words or pictures are connected or Velcro to a feeling or sensation, they might be a little more stubborn, like hanging around a little bit longer. So spend some more time with them. Turn the camera off if you need. So if you've done that skillfully, then either through witnessing those words or using some of our hand tools, you've gotten some freedom, some reprieve from that set of words. And those labels, depression and sadness, they've all kind of gone now. We can come down and actually feel the actual energy of the body without those words, without those labels, and feel. And when we feel in that level, when there's no thoughts on there, we don't really know what that energy is, right? It's just energy. We can just rest with it. Same thing applies though. Sometimes just in resting with it, being very quiet with it. Again, you could turn the video off for that. Just watch what happens. As you're resting there, you'll notice either that whatever energy was there with those words and pictures can maybe start to dissipate, or maybe it gets stuck. Doesn't matter. Just let whatever happens happen as you rest there for a second. Feeling directly from awareness. Allowing it. Being really gentle and allowing, tender, as you rest with it and feel it. But again, you might notice that what compels your attention is that as you're resting with that, you have this feeling in your sternum or somewhere in your body that feels very tight, like the energy just wants to hang on there. And it feels like that's connected to the feeling of being depressed or whatever. Well, one thing you can do is if you see a form or a shape to that thing in the sternum, you can just take two imaginary hands and put them around that sensation. And just let the hands dance with the sensation, wherever it goes, whatever it does. Let the hands follow it. Again, you can turn off the video for a second to do that. For those of you who do not have a form or a shape for that, you just feel into that energy and just let your attention move with it or stay stuck with it and just allow it to be as it is, right? Okay? Now, again, turn off the camera anytime you need to work with your own experience. Turn it off and then turn it back on. Come back to this simple inquiry here, this reverse inquiry, if you will. It's not actually simple inquiry is the way we define it. This is reverse inquiry. And so maybe this time you turn up the heat a little bit. Sometimes turning up the heat in the way that we ask a reverse or state a reverse inquiry statement is so important. So instead of saying, I'm not depressed, say something even more absurd to see if you can get more of the worm to come out from the unconscious, this belief system of being depressed. You could say, I'm happy and content with my life. And then just watch. See, because that's a stronger statement, and the ego, if there's an ego there that believes it's depressed, it's not going to like that phrase. I'm happy and content in my life. That just gives us more to look at there. Turn and look towards it. You have to discern what's happening in your experience to know how to be with it, right? If it's just one phrase there or just one image, just rest with that. Keep it simple. If it's a series of things, one after the other, remember you can do that clearing method style where you drag and drop things one at a time, going to the tapping in between each drop, bringing things one at a time through if it's too much in that way. If it's a whole bunch of things at once coming up, you can treat it as like one collage of things and just kind of rest with all of it if you want. But you want to see that it falls away. That's the key. You're not pushing it away. You just want to let it be there until it falls away naturally. And sometimes these thoughts don't fall away. And it's important to give them that extra little space to fall away so you can get into the body again. So let's say there's still some stuff up there that's sticky in your thought stream. Just follow me. Begin tapping on the forehead. This is that version of the clearing method I showed you, where you shift your focus away from whatever sticky thoughts are there, just gently onto the sound of the tapping. Just notice that sound. And then switch to noticing the sensation of the tapping. Just feel that for a second, the thumping on your forehead. And then bring your attention down into the sensations of the body, just resting with what's there, feeling into it, allowing it, breathing. So shifting focus to body awareness. And then finally shifting focus to the space around you, to the right side of you, to the left side of you, in front of you, above you, and even within you. A space that permeates even the sensations that you're feeling. And then drop that tapping. You see, there's different tools, and I've given you all of them. You use them in a way that it feels intuitively right for you, given whatever's happening in your experience. If something is sticky, use a hand tool. If it's not too sticky, just rest with it. But the key is to let these thoughts really come to rest before you go into the body. Otherwise, you drag these stories and thoughts into the body unconsciously. You come down in and you still believe this stuff up here. If you don't let it come to rest, you still believe it on some level. So you pull it in here. You don't want to do that. That just helps. That's just re-identifying with the story again. That way, right? So you can continue to work with these inquiries. Use any reverse inquiry that challenges your depression belief system. I've given you a few reverse inquiries and a few different tools here, but the sky's the limit here. Some other reverse inquiries could be, I'm hopeful for the future, right? Because depression comes with like a hopelessness. Not the kind of hopelessness that you find in non-duality where people say, when you're living in the moment, you don't need hope because you're alive and awake now to life. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is the hopelessness that we experience within the story of ourselves. The story, the time-bound story, hopeless. So a good reverse inquiry would just be, I'm hopeful. And then that depression story could just come up and say, no, you're not. And here's why, right? It's another reverse inquiry, and then just be with that in the same way. I guess what I'm saying is don't necessarily settle just for someone saying you're depressed or you believing that, or even a doctor saying that. You may need medication for sure. Maybe you need TMS, maybe you need ketamine therapy, maybe you need some other things to integrate with this, but don't overlook the power of inquiry. Because what we believe about ourselves often governs the states that we find ourselves in. If I believe I'm depressed, if I believe I'm hopeless, if I believe I'm not good enough, that can create sadness, which looks like depression. Do you throw a pill on that every time? Or do you inquire into it to see, that it's not real, it's not you, it's just thinking, just feeling that you were identified with. Because if you stop for one moment here with me and just be here now for a moment, be awake to the colors and the shapes in the room, the space, hear the sounds, noticing you're this presence that experiences all this here in the moment. In this space of now, there's nobody who's depressed. It's just awareness here. And if you can get just a glimpse of that, you can see that a lot of what people call depression are just stories that they're buying into, and feelings that they haven't come in and really felt yet. And that if you do inquire into those stories and rest with those feelings, you can live and abide more here in the present moment, where there isn't depression, there's no depressed person here. It's a fiction, the mind. Love you.